Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our webinar today, InvestAmerica and Beshara Global Immigration. Topic today is going to be alternative routes for H-1B visa holders. And with that, I'll introduce you to our moderator, Gene King from Sequence Financial Specialists. Good morning, Gene.
Good morning, Mike, and a pleasure to be with you and this group of folks here today to talk about H-1B and alternatives. Thank you. And as moderator this morning, I'm going to reintroduce everyone and start with Mr. Edward Beshara, who is the managing partner of Beshara Global Immigration Law. Ed, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Mike, Brian. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And I'm sure this will be a very interesting and enlightening webinar.
Absolutely, and we're going to make it fun so everybody joining can really participate. Also with us today is Mike Zinnick, who has two important responsibilities. He's CEO and president of InvestAmerica, which is our company that manages E2, EB1C, EB5, and work with H-1B visa holders. As well, he is our principal, the responsible person for our FINRA broker-dealer, Sequence Financial Specialist. So he holds two incredible titles, and I look forward to us kind of getting started here. A really important request I'd like to ask for those that are attending today. In the very bottom, when you move your mouse, you see a Q&A and a chat function. If everyone would use the Q&A, that would really be great if you have a question, because I will see it and be able to answer as well. We'll be able to answer and follow up and keep track of those questions and the answers. The chat function does work, so if you need to chat with somebody in particularly, that's fine, but we would really prefer all questions come through the Q&A. So with no further ado, why don't I just throw it out here to this incredible team and talk about the disadvantages of an H-1B at this time in the marketplace. How about that, Ed?
Sure. Well, I tell you what, yes, and this will be an interactive, so we're going to be talking about various points. Now, when we talk about, immigration, we always talk about people coming in on a temporary visa or people coming in on a permanent visa. The H-1B category is very popular for US companies trying to bring in professionals from the world, and basically usually the US company will say, look, I need someone to come and work for us in a professional capacity. And usually H-1B is defined as someone having either a US bachelor's degree or the equivalent of a US bachelor's degree. The process is very popular, and it used to be more popular than today, because when a US company says, I want to file a petition for a professional to come and work for me, whether they're a graduate of a US university or school, or whether they're coming from another country, and a lot of the US employers, the companies, really want these professionals because of not only their education, but their experience. There's only 65,000 petitions that can be approved for these professionals per year. And so the demand is greater than the supply of these petitions. Usually about 250,000 companies want professionals every year. Only 65,000 are available. So there's almost like a lottery. So as far as we are concerned for 2020, the numbers have already been used. And so the next time an employer can file a petition would be April the 1st of 2021. If there's a lottery, and there will be, and the petitions are accepted, they still have to be processed for approval. And then the earliest start date for a H-1B would be October the 1st of next year, 2021, right? So for the employer to try to bring in, the people that they want, it's very uncertain. It's also more uncertain, really, for the people that are trying to obtain a type of temporary residency status in the US going through the H-1B. That's why we talked about the disadvantages very quickly. The employment is restricted to one employer. They can't go off and work for a number of different employers. The H-1B, if they're picked and if they start, it's limited for 6 years. Permanent residency through a job offer may take longer than 6 years, and therefore there's maybe a little bit of a difficulty, even though possibility of extending their H-1B status. This is based upon the fact that in the category where an employer says, I want this person as a professional, either the EB2 category or the EB3 category, there is retrogression. That means the demand may be greater than the supply of visas for that category, and the employers have to wait a long time before they're able to get their professionals' green card. So the professionals have to wait a long time before they get a green card, and therefore their H-1B may be extended. So a lot of disadvantages associated with the H-1B. Also, we go back to students who could be the people that are getting degrees and they want to jump into this H-1B category. There's no guarantee that a foreign student after 4 years here for a bachelor's degree or another 2 years for a master's, no guarantee that an employer can continue to employ them after their practical training period. No guarantee. There's no guarantee that even if the employer picks them and they file a H-1B petition, that it will be accepted and approved. And therefore, those students have no other way of staying in the country unless they listen to this webinar, because we're going to tell them how they can stay here besides the H-1B category.
So go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, and Ed, so, and also there's a current, can you talk a little bit about the current ban
Yes.
On H-1B and the challenges, obviously, for people that are right now overseas that have been thinking that or hoping that they would be able to get here and are not able to currently.
Well, exactly, Mike. You know, there's a suspension of immigration, and immigration means permanent residency. When we talk about suspension of immigration, that means no one can go through a consulate to get an immigrant visa unless it's EB5 or they're a spouse of either a US citizen or permanent resident, family member. But the H-1B is banned. You can't go right now with the most, we've got exceptions to exceptions to exceptions, new proclamations, new executive orders. So right now you can't just have an employer file a petition and you can't just go and pick up the H-1B visa at a consulate. Can't be done, right? So basically, I think that when we talk about can't get a H-1B, that's consulate processing. A lot of things can be done if they're in the US, as a student, and then they try to file a H-1B petition and try to change and extend status while they're in the US, that could be done, right? But it's not dealing with the consulate. Can't deal with the consulate for the H-1B. You may be able to do it if you're in the US.
Trying to keep with our thoughts here, alternative routes for the H-1B, and so that our audience understand, we're going to, of all the different options, we're going to try to concentrate on E2, EB1C, and EB5 today. Why don't we maybe swing the conversation a little bit towards E2, knowing that everybody that's listening, we're going to take up all three opportunities, but I think it'd be very difficult to combine them all at one time. So let's really do our best to kind of hang in there one at a time with questions and answers. And why don't we just discuss E2 at this particular time? What do you think, guys?
Yeah, sure. We can do it very quickly and then we can interact with each other. But, there's, as I said in the beginning, there's an immigrant visa process and then a temporary visa process. When we usually talk about temporary visas and the time period it takes to get that temporary visa status or in the US, it's usually a couple of months. Permanent residency is going to be several months, if not years. So if we talk about an E2 as an alternative to H-1B, that means that professionals in other countries, students who are about to graduate with a degree, they may be allowed to do practical training, optional practical training, but how can they spend time here and do what they really want to do, and that's be a professional, be employed in the US? If you're a citizen of a country that has an E2 treaty with the US, well, that could be the UK, it could be Australia, it could be New Zealand, it could be France, Germany, Italy. Then based upon that citizenship, you can look at a business, franchise, existing business. You can create your own, even though it's a little bit more difficult. But let's say you look at a business franchise, you say, I like that idea, I want to run that business. So we file the petition in the US if they're already under a student status or optional practical training, and then they can change status without leaving the US. And basically we condition the contract to purchase the franchise on the granting of the petition, because if the petition is filed in the US, then through expedited processing, they get an answer within, let's say, 15 days. And then the transaction occurs where the funds in an irrevocable escrow account goes to the seller. So that way the person is comfortable that money is not going over to the seller unless they are granted the E2 status. E2 visas are still available through the consulate. So if someone's outside the US and they want to come into the US under an E2, they may visit the US, they may remotely decide on a business or franchise, application is prepared, submitted to the consulate, and it's done. And then they can come in with their spouse and family if they have any. But the other important thing about the E2, and let's say it's for the professional or for the student that may be already in the US or maybe outside the US, and they may say, look, we want to be a professional working for a US employer, and knowing the restrictions of the H-1B, first of all, getting that petition filed and going through the lottery and getting picked, not having a start date until October the 1st, how can that professional use the E2 to quickly, in a matter of a few months, be certain about coming into the US? So if they are married, and let's assume the spouse is the gentleman who wants to really run the E2 business, and the spouse is the lady, the wife that wants to be the professional and work for a US employer. So, or it could be vice versa. So the spouse that wants to run the business can be the E2 investor. The spouse will accompany the E2 investor principal into the US, and then once they are in the US under the E2 status, one spouse is running the business. The spouse that is not the principal investor, for example, can apply for an employment card and in a matter of a few months get that employment card and work anywhere and work for that US employer who would have filed the H-1B petition. But now they're certain that then they can go to that US employer and say, look, I've got my employment card, I can work for you, right? You don't have to go through the lottery and file the petition as of April the 1st of next year. You don't have to wait until October the 1st if our process is approved. You can employ me today. You can employ me right now under the fact that I have an employment card because I'm under an E2 status and my spouse is running the E2 business, right? So usually the E2 visa could be for a 5-year period, multiple entry. On the E2, there's no limitation on how many times you can get an extension. Remember, the H-1B is limited to 6 years. E2, no limitation on how many times you can apply for the extension. Now, if you are not a citizen of an E2 country, then of course we have good service providers that we all know that we can go to, and they can get citizenship in various countries. One of the countries is Grenada. The reason why we picked Grenada, because it does have an E2 treaty with the US, it does have a pretty good economy, and at the same time, we know that with service providers, they can get citizenship in Grenada in a matter of a few months, right? With an investment in real estate usually, but in a few months. That means that at the same time, we know that they're going to get citizenship in Grenada. At the same time they're doing that, concurrently, they're looking at the E2 process in the US. Once they get citizenship in Grenada, then immediately we file the E2 application and they're approved and they're coming in with the spouse and family.
Ed, why don't I ask, with that piece of information, which is incredibly knowledgeable, why don't I ask Mike to give us a little understanding of, okay, if they start talking with you about an E2, how does InvestAmerica work with them to find the business venture that they might be interested in involving themselves with? That makes sense.
Exactly, exactly.
Sure. Thank you, Gene. Yeah, so all the things that Ed said, we're very in tune with that, and we've been, InvestAmerica, we've been working in the immigration space since 2010, and with E2 and EB5 for as long as we've been around. We've built an E2 platform that really helps the E2 applicants do one major thing, and that is pick a business that is going to, number one, qualify for the E2 visa, whether it's being able to invest as much as is necessary, or having the number of employees that are necessary. And both of those things are not clearly defined in the regulations, but knowing from practical experience, there needs to be there's a certain number of, or a certain amount of that's invested, and a certain number of gainfully employed U.S. People that need to be part of the business for the E2 business to have a good chance of being approved. And then also, and even more importantly, is to make sure that business is sustainable and profitable, so that not only will you get approved, but also will be able to renew that visa as it comes out. Most countries, the renewal period is 5 years. Some are 3 years. Some are significantly less. But our goal is to make sure that the business that's selected is sustainable, and that way, they can continue to operate the business and continue to keep them and their families here in the United States. We do that through a lot of due diligence, and also making sure that there are a lot of variety of options for people to choose from. We try and target people to what they're good at, what they're experienced in, what do they want to do, how much money do they have to invest, where do they want to live. So those are things that are all key components. A lot of people come to us and say, hey, I want to start this business here, or I have an idea, I already have a business, I want to do it there. And that's fine in a lot of cases. But the key is making sure that it's going to be approved, it's going to be structured properly so it can be approved, and that it's sustainable. That's really the main thing that we do at InvestAmerica, to make sure, working with Ed, working with a corporate attorney, working with the right business plan writer, to make sure that part of it is done right, and really kind of the whole start to finish one-stop shop solution to make sure that the investors have a good experience, as well as land here comfortably in the United States with their family, and are able to sustain that lifestyle throughout for as long as they desire.
So I'm going to start to close out our conversation about E2, and I just wanted to let all that are watching, unfortunately, we aren't sitting actually at a round table where everybody can interrupt each other, which happens so often in a round table discussion. But if you have any questions about what you just heard in the immigration process, any questions about how do I select the business, how do I get involved in the business, we help with CPAs, we help with attorneys. Of course, you've got immigration, and Ed guides you through the entire process. But just looking to see if we have any questions, and I'm going to slowly kind of move our direction towards, and if any questions come in and we need to redirect ourselves back to the E2, that's fine. But I'd like to move ourselves maybe towards the thought process of EB1C. And Ed, if you kind of give us an overview and a thought process of the actual EB1C process from an immigration standpoint.
Actually, I'm sorry. Before you do that, can I just give a quick overview of the Grenada process? Ed brought it up, and obviously it's important for people that don't have, not from an E2 treaty country, and that's something else that we can help with. These are, what I'm showing on the screen here is a really kind of a snapshot of the advantages of the citizenship in Grenada. It's a very simple process. It's a process that we have a partnership with in Grenada to help you deal with, and it can be done simultaneously with the E2. Obviously, you don't file the petition until you get the Grenada citizenship, but all this can be done simultaneously. And just a few points to see who this citizenship is pertainable to, number one, it's a little bit more extensive than the E2. So that's something to be aware of, because parents and grandparents and older children can be included with the Grenada citizenship. However, when you do an E2, if those people are coming along, they'll need to do separate E2 petitions. The biggest thing is it helps you get an E2 treaty visa in the United States, and also it gives you visa-free travel to over 143 destinations around the world, including China. So I just wanted to give a quick update on that for those of you that are going to be interested in that piece of it, are going to need to pursue that piece of it because you're not from an E2 treaty country. There is a very distinct and simple pathway to making that happen.
Thank you, Mike. But also, Gene and Mike, remember our goal, InvestAmerica and Beshara Global. We have two paths. There's an investment business goal and an immigration goal. And concurrently, the three of us are here to support those goals, right? Concurrently. So, we're not going to let one interfere with the other. Because someone wants to definitely come into the US, but also they want to make a good business decision. And of course, that's where you, Gene, and Mike come in and play a very important role.
Thanks, Ed. So with that, I don't see any questions at this particular point. So Ed, let's kind of continue the roundtable discussion here on opportunities outside of the H-1B, and let's lean towards the permanent residency of EB-1C.
Right. I think that, again, I've been saying lately that this is really the forgotten visa process to get a green card. It's the new dawn. The new dawn is that now we have a new EB-5 regulations, and we'll talk about the EB-5, which could be wonderful for some people, but also the EB-1C could be wonderful as well. Now, when we talk about EB-1C, it's the employment-based category 1 sub-paragraph C, right? And when we talk about EB-5, it's the employment-based category 5 for investing in an EB-5 regional center business and getting a green card. EB-1, it's the same category, EB-1C. If you forget EB-1C, just remember Edward Beshara, EB, and you're okay, right? So
that works.
That works. So why would we talk about EB-1C? There's a number of reasons why. If we're looking at a foreign corporation that's large enough, it has not only good, solid revenue for several years, it may have the right organizational hierarchy of managers, high-level managers and executives, vice presidents. So we know that we have a strong foreign corporation. And then all of a sudden they say, well, look, we want to transfer some of our executives to the US. Well, we know that people can buy businesses under the E2 category if they're citizen, and they get a 5-year visa, multiple entry. But what if they decide to set up their own new office and from scratch? They set up the corporation, they incorporate. So if they incorporate and it's new, then they're only able to get for a new office 1 year, multiple entry for that executive. And in that 1 year, really you have a business plan to build up that US business to a level where there's high-level managers, high-level executives. And so this is an immigration requirement. It may exceed what they really want to do from a business standpoint, but it may say, look, you need to do this because if you don't do it, the US Immigration Service is not going to allow an extension of stay unless you do something within that first year. So what you could do is come into the US under an L1U office. Then InvestAmerica could say, look, we're going to say this is what you need to do from a business perspective to build up your business. But you also, instead of doing it yourself, you can buy an existing business either when you're here under the new office 1 year, multiple entry, or you could do it before you get here. But either way, if you buy an existing business that already has the revenue and already has the organizational hierarchy with high-level managers, then immediately that existing business that you're buying into can get a 3-year visa, L1. So you can go from an L1 1-year new office to a 3-year L, and you're allowed to be here for a longer period of time. How does that fit into EB1C? Well, as long as the US business has been in existence for more than 1 year, and it does have the organizational hierarchy, then you can use that US existing business to immediately petition for that executive that may already be here under the L1. And again, right now, EB1C is suspended. You can't apply for EB1C at a US embassy or consulate. L1 is suspended, right? Unless the US subsidiary is in the business of providing healthcare products because of the pandemic and it's in the national interest. But if you're already in the US under the visitor status or student status and you change to an L1 status, you can do that. And then you have the existing US business as a US subsidiary, then immediately doing everything in the US, you can use that US business now that's big enough to petition for the executive under the EB1C. And the reason why now this becomes very important is that the process of petitioning and getting an approval for the green card of the EB1C may only take 12 months, may only take a year and a half. Now, EB5 to get the full green card, well, first of all, to get the conditional green card under EB5, we'll talk about that later, may take 2.5 years at least. To get the full green card, it may take 6 or 7 years. And for Chinese nationals, it may take 10 to 15 years. But under the EB1C, for a Chinese national or people that face retrogression, it may only take a couple of years, right? So you've got a big comparison. And the difference between EB5 is that it has to be located in certain geographical areas to take advantage of a $900,000 investment for one family. For EB1C, the US subsidiary can be located anywhere in the United States. And the next thing is that when Mike and Jean find that US business, if it's already in existence, or the people want to grow a business in the US, where Jean and Mike can help, that business in the US, and they may, and someone may be spending, okay, $900,000 or $1 million or more on that US business located anywhere in the US, then under the EB1C category, not only will that US business petition for that one executive and family, but the EB1C allows that US company now to petition for more than one executive. So it could be petitioning for a second executive and family, a third executive and family. So remember, in comparison, EB5 is just one investment, 900 for one family. EB1C, if the decision is made to build up the business or buy an existing business, then for the same amount, anywhere located in the US, you can now petition for more than one executive, maybe 2, 3, or 4, right? So that's why the EB1C is doable. It can be done. And it's for those investors anywhere in the world that are coming into the US and say, look, we want to run our own business, but we want to bring in more than one family. We want, you know, this could be a family business.
I got to unmute. It really works better when you're not muted.
Yeah.
That so blends into, and I don't want to steal Mike's thunder here, but really when you're talking to the three of us, you have a FINRA broker dealer, investment banking firm, you have immigration, you have specialty in all the immigration processes of E2, EB1C, EB5 through InvestAmerica. Mike, I might ask you to talk a little bit about, with what Ed just said, what the real true process is from an investment banking standpoint through InvestAmerica to actually help someone to locate that business and go through the entire due diligence process of making sure everything is right for them to come in and get that business up and running alongside of the immigration work that has to be done. So it's a twofold process.
Sure, sure. Well, what we do is we work with the individual applicant. Our goal ultimately is to find the best path for everybody. And once we make that determination, we interview the investor, the applicant, and we determine that, you know, EB1C or EB5 or E2, once we figure out which pathway they'd like to go down, then we start pursuing what we do best. And on the EB1C, kind of like the E2, we're looking for compatible businesses that can either segue with the company that they're coming from and work with the L1 or work with another pathway, or if it's a new business that needs to be, you know, go in operation for a year and be set up properly for the EB1C, we look for those specific structures that are going to be conducive for EB1C. We make sure that those management levels are available there. We make sure that the business is going to be something that is compatible with the applicant, and that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time to work through that process and make sure that, because not every business qualifies, not every business structure qualifies. And then once we do find the alternatives, the other key is doing due diligence and making sure that if it's an existing business, that it's going to be around for a long time, going to make sure that it's going to be workable for the investor to be able to be employed in that business, and for the managerial levels to be maintained, because we want to make sure that even though the EB1C process is typically shorter than, say, an EB5 process to get the green card, it's also a very specialty area. So not everything is going to work out, you know, specifically or exactly the way it would be were it a passive investment, were it a business that is already sort of pre-qualified or pre-structured, like an EB5 is. So our role is to make sure that due diligence is done, make sure that the structure is proper, and make sure that the investor is happy with what they're getting themselves into.
And really in the United States, and I'd like for you guys to concur or maybe expound on this, in the United States, when it comes to purchasing a business, pretty much this day and time, anything under $1 million is managed through a business broker. We're a FINRA, Securities and Exchange Commission broker dealer, much difference in due diligence. And that's what Mike was just talking about. So if you're buying a franchise for $125,000, or as Ed said, you're buying an existing business that's got great balance sheet and executive team in place for $2 or $3 million, no matter what it is, we treat them all the same when it comes to due diligence to do our best to protect you. So with Ed, with Mike, with our company, you have a threefold process of protection, from immigration to selecting the right business to due diligence. So any questions from the audience right now when it comes to the EB1C process? And I will pause for a second and see if Mike and Ed have any other comments, and then we'll move into the EB5, which many of you may know a lot about or may not know anything about, but we'll take it from the basics and move forward as quickly as possible. It's about 11:38 Eastern time. I think we'll probably try to slow down around 11:50 to 12 o'clock and look for any questions to close out. This is being taped. So my understanding is it will be available so that you can review it afterwards or send it to somebody that you might like to see it. Ed, Mike, any other thoughts about the EB1C that we might have forgotten, which I can't imagine we would forget anything?
I think that is, you know, every individual and every business person has their own preference. You know, for the people that don't have a large, you know, foreign entity, which they are part owners of maybe, or executives of, where they have an organizational hierarchy, well, then they can't do the L1 or EB1C. You still have to have that foreign entity that you've worked for 1 year that's been in existence for more than 1 year. But for the people that don't have that, well, then they jump into the E2, as we just talked about. You know, they either have the citizenship of an E2 country or they get it in Grenada, right? So it's a matter of choice whether they can do the L1 EB1C or whether they have to jump in to do the E2. Right?
And talk for a minute about, okay, I can't do EB1C, but I want permanent status, but I don't want to invest maybe in an EB5. Talk for a second about how literally you could come on an E2 and convert to EB1C.
Well, you know, if you want to come in under the E2, and let's say, for example, you say, well, look, I have this foreign business, it's large enough, but I really don't want to buy a large existing business today, but I am a citizen of an E2 country, and I'm also the owner of the foreign business, right? I am a citizen of an E2 country. I'm an owner of the foreign business that's quite large, but I don't want to buy a large existing business today. I want to come in, set up a US business. I may go to Gene and Mike and say, okay, I'll spend 100 or a couple of hundred on a franchise business or an existing business that may not have this big, large organizational hierarchy. I'll buy it. So now you've got a foreign business being owned by a E2 citizen coming in and buying the business franchise. So the US corporation that's set up to run the franchise is really owned by the foreign business. And if the foreign business is owned by E2 citizens, now sounds like you have a parent subsidiary, but the subsidiary company in the US is operating a smaller business franchise. And when you build it up, right, you build up the US business with more expansion, maybe more locations, and you have now a larger organizational hierarchy, you use the already existing US subsidiary now to be the petitioner for an EB1C executive to get the green card. So you're going from an E2 entry into the US with the subsidiary, and then as soon as the subsidiary is large enough as far as an organizational hierarchy, you use the US business to petition for the green card for that executive that has been an executive in the foreign business.
And with our team, we can consult and encourage and help manage and help them to understand what has to be done.
Of course.
Conversion, so you can go from visa to permanent green card status,
right,
while owning the business, starting the business, and growing the business, right?
Right. Remember, for the L1U office, one only gets 1 year.
Yep.
If you have an existing business that's large enough, then you can get an L1 for 3 years. But some executives that are in larger operations overseas may not want right now today to buy into that larger existing business, or only have 1 year to set up this larger operation. But under an E2, you can have a business purchase that's small enough, 100, 200,000, whatever it is that you're selling as a franchise. And on that basis, they're coming in under the E2, right? Still have the multinational corporate setup, parent company, subsidiary company, that can still come in under the E2. And they may get a 5-year E2, multiple entry, but as soon as the US subsidiary, which is a E2 corporation, is large enough, then you can use that E2 corporation to be the subsidiary company in the US to petition under EB1C for the executive to come into the US and be a green card holder. They're already here under an E2, but now they're changing to an EB1C.
And this is a huge amount of information. It's a fire hose of information, but all of this can, with questions, follow up afterwards, we can get you the information so that you don't feel like you're having to take every note of everything. Plus, remember, this is being recorded, so you actually can take this recording. You can stop and start and take notes again from the recording, so it's good to kind of tune in.
Right, and Gene, I'll say this to Mike and Eugene. You know, this is the trouble that a lot of foreign national investors are having today. I've been doing this for 37 years, right? And Gene and Mike, you've been doing this for a very long time yourself. But when someone comes in to, whether it's an attorney or broker dealer, and the attorney or the broker dealers do not have experience, they don't have the knowledge or the experience. Someone comes in, let's say to me as an immigration attorney, I want to buy a business, fine, let's just do it. But we take a holistic approach. We bring in a team of experienced professionals, and we sit down and really study the situation and say, this is your best choice right now. If it complies with your wishes, let's do it. But we're analyzing it. It's just like going to a hospital. And what's the name of the hospital where they just do the general research? It's in Jacksonville, Florida, Mike.
The Mayo Clinic?
Mayo Clinic, right, exactly. So the Mayo Clinic, you've seen all these different doctors and trying to come up with the best solution for that patient. We're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing because if someone, you know, just comes to a professional and they say, this is what we want to do, and they say, fine, we'll accept it, let's just do it. But I don't think that's fair to the person that says, look, I'm making a move with my family. I'm coming into the US. This is really important for us. So we look at the parents, we look at the children, and we say, look, this is important for the family. We want to make sure that from a business standpoint and an immigration standpoint, you're going to get the best deal, you're going to get the best process.
So we're here today to talk about alternatives to H-1B, and we've reviewed the E-2 visa and that process from immigration to actualization of the business. And we've now really discussed EB-1C from immigration to actually operating, running the business. And we've discussed E2 to EB-1C, so you could go from visa to permanent green card status. Let's transition over to EB-5, where if someone would like to come to the United States with a family and they just want to purchase into a transaction and not go through the processes of E2, EB-1C, hey man, let's coup de grace, let's go all the way and let's go EB-5.
Mm-hmm. Well, very quickly, and I know that Mike wants to jump in and Eugene. EB-5, remember, it's for that individual who has the money to invest $900,000 plus the admin fee plus the attorney fee. Number one, mentally, they don't want to be bothered in running a business. They don't want to be bothered in trying to learn how to run a business in the US.
Right.
It's for that individual. They may not have, you know, a bigger corporation overseas where they want to set up a US subsidiary. They may not really want to do that. They're very content with what assets they have in their own country. But for the people that want to come in and they have the money to invest in EB-5, our goal is to say, do you want to make money? Yes, I want to make money. Well, there may not be a huge rate of return on the EB-5, but you can, Gene and Mike, you can direct them to say, look, if you want to make money, we're going to suggest, maybe recommend wealth management products that they're going to invest in, some real estate that they may invest in where they get short-term rental income. And with the wealth management products that are conservative, that are probably going to give them a better rate of return than what they're doing in their own country, like US treasuries or bonds that are conservative, they're getting a rate of return. They're getting some rental income from real estate purchases in the US. And with those assets, they borrow against those assets and use those borrowed funds now for the EB-5 that they've chosen, and where you, Gene, and Mike have helped them make that due diligence choice.
And thanks, Ed. And I know Mike will talk about our portfolio approach to EB-5 instead of a singular approach, but Mike, thoughts, comments from your perspective on the EB-5?
Sure. Obviously, the EB-5 now is a $900,000 minimum proposition versus a $500,000 like it was until November of last year. And you know, so it's even more important to make the right investment. It is obviously not for everybody because it is a larger investment, but it's still the same amount of care. In fact, probably even more care needs to go into that as we were talking about for the E2 and for the EB1C. So, I think that our approach is very similar in the sense that what we're looking to do is make sure that the projects that we represent, which is, as Gene mentioned, is a portfolio approach, where we have several different options from several different regional centers. We are not beholden to one project, and that's to provide people an opportunity to look at different asset classes, different locations, different structures, different annual returns, projects that are in different stages and phases of their construction, and that's really what we want to be able to provide to people, because not everybody has the same taste, not everybody has the same preferences, and not everything is right for somebody. So that's our approach, and in order to get on our portfolio, the due diligence has to be there as well, and even more so than for the E2 or the EB1C. These are businesses that are structured by other people, by either real estate developers or regional centers or other entities for the benefit of their project. So we are looking out for the investor, because the investor is a passive investor, and they're not going to have much influence at all, if any influence at all, when it comes to those decisions that are made. So we have to make sure that they're protected. So our portfolio of investments for EB5 are typically ones that are very investor focused and also provide a lot of investor protections, because it's not it's a very big financial decision, but it's also a very big lifestyle decision. So as Ed said, our goal is to sit around with people and make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into. We make sure that we hold their hand as much as possible through the entire process and make sure they have what they need. And it's typically not just making this investment, it's also making sure that they have other professionals. Obviously, immigration attorney is very important. International tax attorneys are very important also, to make sure that they're doing things the right way, because once they become a permanent resident, they are subject to worldwide taxation as a U.S. resident. So those are things that we like to focus on. And again, we've been doing this for a long time. Since 2010, we've represented almost 30 projects and over almost 350 families from 22 different countries around the world. So we've been able to really have some good success, and of all that, we've had 100% approval rate of I-526s and I-829s that have been adjudicated. So right now, up until this point, this very minute, no denials, which is what we pride ourselves on, and look to make sure that the projects are solid and the investors are taken care of.
Amazing. Ed, what would you add to that overall discussion from an immigration standpoint that the folks that are watching us and listening right now, we may not have included when it comes to the EB5 itself, immigration?
Well, I think that, with the pandemic this year, and it's not just within the US, but global, I think one has to be very, very careful of the businesses that are chosen. And for those investors that say, well, look, we want to rely on the people that know how to run a business in the US. And we know that, there's a high, maybe unemployment rate, but with the EB5, if we're making an investment and money is spent under a EB5 regional center project, well, it really shows that the requirement for 10 jobs per investor can occur through an indirect or induced job count. So the concern about the pandemic and employment creation and the viability of the business with an EB5 regional center project, the investment money is going in, it's being used for certain infrastructure expenditures, and as a result, it creates an indirect job count. So the job numbers are satisfied because they're required to be a certain number of jobs per investor. That's done, right? So for a lot of people, the EB5 investment is for them very secure. They're relying on the professionals, the business people to run the business successfully. The due diligence is done by Mike and Gene through InvestAmerica. And now they're satisfied. We file a petition. within 2 years, they're getting their conditional green card, and then they're able to get their full green card after a period of time, and then be able to exit, the project. So for that individual that likes this structure, it's very good. It's excellent.
Perfect. Again, I go to the audience and I'm watching carefully. We are doing such an incredible job. Waiting on some questions. If somebody wants to stump the panel, we always like to ask that question that Ed can't answer and Mike has no idea about, which hasn't come up on many of those lately. But anyway, I think our timing is good. We're about 11:55. Any other closing comments, Ed or Mike, you'd like to kind of close out with at this point?
Yeah, I know that this is for Mike and Eugene. The Circa, that's an exemplar approved project.
Yes,
Right.
correct, it is.
So could you explain? I know what it is because we've filed many exemplar petitions for clients before.
Sure.
So I think a lot of people would like to know, I think, if they don't know already, what an exemplar approval is. Yeah.
Sure. So an exemplar approved project basically means that a project, a regional center, has filed an investor list petition to USCIS to have that project reviewed, its structure reviewed, and basically have USCIS, in simplest terms, say this project meets all the requirements of the EB-5 program, and getting a letter to that effect. And basically what that ultimately means is it's going to be a faster adjudication theoretically when an investor files that petition, because the project end of the approval has already been taken care of. And it also might mean that that an investor is going to, if let's say they file a petition and the exemplar comes afterwards, that their petition may go to a higher position in the pile. It makes it easier for the adjudicators because they can look at a pile of people that are coming from an exemplar approved project and say, okay, we're just going to look at the source of funds of this investor, and once we approve that, since we see we already have an exemplar, we're going to go ahead and approve it. So it's basically it's a very big stamp of approval without being over committing to what it really means. But basically it's a pre-approval of the project that allows for faster adjudication, and also should give investors comfort, because it means that the things that they would typically want to make sure are there, whether the proper job creation, whether it's proper allocation of expenses, whether it's the project being in a TEA, those kinds of things, that can be sort of pre-qualified by USCIS. And to date, we've worked with several exemplar projects. Circa is definitely an exemplar approved project. And the other beautiful thing about the Circa project is it's already created enough jobs for all the investors. The project is about 95% complete. They are going to be opening their doors for the restaurants, and the casino will be opening up on October 28th. So not just barely a month from now. And the hotel itself will be opening on at the end of December. They're already taking room reservations. It's a very impressive property. The EB-5 portion is a very small portion of the capital stack, which helps with the likelihood of people getting their money back. It's a nice 2 to 3% annual return, so a little bit higher than most other EB-5 projects. So it's a very good project, solid project, very investor focused.
And there's still some room for investors, correct?
Absolutely. Yep. Definitely room for more investors, and I'm happy for anybody to provide information and ask any questions.
So our timing is absolutely perfect. I don't know how we've done so well, but it is. For the audience, you will have access to this discussion today that we have had, so that if you would like to review it, you can. If you'd like to send it to someone else, you'd be able to. You'll also have access to the communications to each one of us if you had any further questions. I've got one quick question here I'm going to look at, and it is a very good question, and it says, "Thank you so very much for the information today." So without further ado, Bryant Korth, who is the production manager for this, will make sure everybody is followed up with and you have the information. Speaking on behalf of Edward Beshara of the Beshara Global Immigration Law Firm. Speaking on behalf of Mike Zinnick, President, CEO of InvestAmerica, Principal for Sequence Financial Specialist. My name is Gene King with Sequence Holdings, Senior Managing Director and Managing Director of Sequence Financial Specialist. I thank all of you for attending today and look forward to receiving any communications from you and helping in any way that we can. Closing remarks, gentlemen?
Look, I just want to say thank you, Gene. Thank you, Mike. You know, love to be able to do this and be associated with InvestAmerica and Sequence Holdings. Thank you, Brian. And of course, you know, as an immigration lawyer for 37 years, doing business immigration as a professor, adjunct professor of business immigration law at the University of Florida Law School, and on the advisory committee of the Investment Migration Council, which is based in Geneva, and IUSA, very much involved with Investing USA that represents the EB5 industry. I will not do a webinar with just anyone, right? It's my pleasure to do this webinar with you, Gene, and you, Mike, because again, credibility, due diligence is the key for every investor.
Thank you, Ed.
I wholeheartedly agree, and we take the same approach. Like to thank everybody for joining us today. You can reach us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, go to our website, InvestAmerica. EB5 is our Instagram handle, as well as InvestAmerica on Facebook. There's lots of videos and newsletters and other things that provide other information for you. And we thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your valuable time, spending your valuable time with us. And we look forward to future webinars that we can provide information and help guide you through your immigration process.
And one last piece of information, our production manager has just communicated with me that this video will be given to Ed for him to distribute how he would wish on his website. It'll be on InvestAmerica's website, and you'll have access through our YouTube channel as well. So we're just trying to make sure you have complete access to it and you'll have access to us. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Again, thank you, gentlemen, and we're going to close out this discussion at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Have a great day.